Hello everyone, welcome back. So what I have here is a preview of the next scene that we're going to be looking at. And this is the final comp with everything added on top. Now when I do these kind of renders, especially with things where I have AUVs, I don't worry too much about the final values or how it looks here, as long as I have that information and can easily tweak it. For example, if the amount of refraction I'm getting from the render is not very visible, like I'm not seeing these spots very well, I still have a lot of control over this in comp, and it's much easier to do it in comp versus having to fiddle and tweak and mess with the shader. And that's what I did. The original render doesn't have a lot of these colors, but all the information is present. And the way I've broken this is basically the ocean with the cliffs, the atmosphere by itself, and then the ships by itself. And the ocean pass had the ships on it and being reflected, but they're not primary, they're not visible to the camera. So this is the final comp, and I'm going to show the render. So this is the main pass for the ocean, and it has multiple AUVs, which we're going to talk about. And you can see the ships here are being reflected and occluding the scene. You see the reflection here. And let's take a look at the AUVs. So I have the main important ones are the reflection, and this is the reflection of basically the ocean, cliffs, and anything that is not a light. And then I have refraction pass, and then I have specular. And specular is the reflection of any light, and that includes the light I have here in the triangle and the HDR light. And then I have diffuse, which has the texture. So if I gain this up, it also includes the cliff. And then a mask, I believe, not this one. Yeah, ocean mask to separate the ocean from the cliff, so I can control them in comp if I wanted to. And then we have light AUVs with the beauty pass of this light, and then the beauty lighting of the environment. And this looks pretty cool already. Okay, so this is the main pass, and then I have two more, one for the ship and one for the atmosphere. So this is the Atmo pass by itself, and I have camera motion, of course. And for the Atmo, I don't have a lot of passes. I have the atmosphere from the environment light, from the center light, and then from the HDR. Okay, then the next one is the ship. So for these ships, what I faked here is I increased the amount of intensity for the center light, the light in the triangle. And the reason for that is I wanted to get a lot of color bleeding. If I go to, I believe, transmission. Yeah, so this is the transmission row. Looking for transmission. This is the transmission filter. So if we multiply these two, we get the transmission. But let me show the center. So this is the light that is in the triangle, and you can see it's overexposed. And the reason for that, I wanted to get more information, and it's easier for me to tune it down in comp versus having a very weak light and increase that. And this is the environment light. I also have reflection occlusion and occlusion. I will talk about this when we get to comp and the final setup for the passes. So these are the three main things: the ships, the ocean, and then the atmosphere. So let's get started. For this environment, I'm going to use a different HDR, and I want to show the website, and it's they give a lot of free stuff. You can donate. They really have nice material here. It used to be you have to pay for this, but now it's run like a Patreon where people contribute and they make more HDR, so it's very, very cool. And the one I'm going to be using is Cloudy. I can't remember the exact name. Partially Cloudy. And you could use any one of them. I just wanted to get some variation in the ocean. I didn't want very uniform colors. So this one would work, this one would work, this one would work, this one would work as well for the type of effect that we want to achieve. And with things like this, with stormy ocean or basically anytime the sky is not very clear and you have a cloudy sky, most of the time we don't get a lot of reflection. It's mostly refraction that we're seeing in the ocean, and that's what I have here. I don't have a lot of reflection. It's mostly refractive surface, which is what's coming from the underneath layer. I actually increased the reflection here just to get this nice spot. It maps to the HDR, but it's not very visible here because of the fog and all. And let's take a look at the HDR. So this is the file, and I'm gaining it down. So this is the default exposure. You see that it contains a lot of information. I probably clamp the sun or crop this or remove it because it could cause fireflies in the render. So maybe it's better to roto out this whole area and leave everything else, because that's the brightest spot. And we're gonna use it with a low exposure and also desaturate it and give it some tint to get different color. So I have I imported the camera anim that I'm going to be using. It's this one, and it's made in Houdini, so it just so one parent that moves the camera straight, and then a second camera that has the tilt, and then these two, one offset and one to add tilt. So like this one is a very flat horizon, this one adds a rotation on the horizon line. You can see how it's a handheld camera or something like that. So let's go to frame 90. I'm gonna disconnect this. I want the horizon line to be flat, and let's go to the RS Dome and import our environment light. And I'm gonna set this to 0. I'm gonna lower the exposure back to 0 to its original value and reduce the intensity here 0.5 because I know the HDR is super bright. And let's lower the render settings. I'm gonna set 1280 by 720, and I'm gonna reduce the settings. I think it's fine. Let's lower this to 0.05 and let's do a render. And I didn't change the camera, so let's do that. And I'm gonna hit the play button to get the interactive preview. And let's turn these off for now. Cool. So this is the actual orientation that I'm going to use in the final scene. By chance the HDR was aligned to the angle that I liked the most. I was getting this nice spot here, and because I'm going to add the cliffs later, it's going to change what gets reflected in here. So it worked really well for this environment, and I got this white spot that works with a bright spot on the back that works with the fog as well. So let's tweak this a bit. Let's turn on the OCIO color correction and set this to 1, this to 0. sorry, this to 0 as well. And I'm going to make sure that this is set to white. I don't want to mess the colors for now. And this already, I really like this. I think I should do render with this as it is. And with this environment, as we talked about, with cloudy environment, we don't get a lot of reflection. I mean, we can get a lot of reflection, but I'm looking for something that has more refraction than reflection. So I'm going to go to the shader. And lower the reflection amount to 0.4. And I want to increase the refraction to 1. And I'm not going to mess with its colors. I'm going to leave it to the default white. And you see we're getting back some of those colors. And I'm going to change, let's remove the vignette. I'm going to change the underneath layer, the ground underneath, to get more colors popping up. So let's turn off the reflection completely and focus on that. Let's go to the ocean bottom and let's play with these colors. Something like that. And let's desaturate this a bit. Let's desaturate this as well. And maybe shift it more towards the green. And shift this more towards the green as well. Okay. Let's go back to the ocean. And introduce the reflection back. And that's pretty much it for the shaders. There's nothing more that we can add that would make this look more realistic, or that I have done that is not here yet. So that's pretty much it. Putting back some diffuse. It's too much. Set it to 0.2, and again we can always tweak this in comp. Now with diffuse, it's a bit tricky because it will affect the amount of reflection and other things in the shader, so we can't remove it completely. But the idea is I want to get those masks. If you guys remember, we made a cusp information, and we can use this to add this information back into the shader. I do think it's very saturated, so let's go to that map and tweak it. So I'm going to reduce the saturation 0.75, 0.7. Yep. And let's do a high-res render, and then we're going to start setting up the cliffs and looking at using RS proxies. So for settings, I'm going to increase this a bit more than previous, 64 to 128. And this adaptive threshold is basically telling Redshift what the threshold that it can use to decide which value to use. But it will start at 64 and stop at 128, which is very good for final qualities. So let's hit render, and we'll continue in the next video. I'll also do a frame in the beginning where the camera is looking down at the ocean. So here, maybe frame this one, frame 20. And it's actually done, so let's wait for it. I'm not going to change anything because the cliffs are going to abstract a lot of things, and I want to tweak after we add all of those because they're going to occlude a lot of things. So let's add this, and then let's do another render. Cool. Yeah, I think it's working pretty well.